And we're live with our 270th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on social media, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on social media. Seth, say hi.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. We are now into 2025, and I know we've taken a couple of weeks off, so there's a few things that we want to get to today before we launch into too much. I did want to give a shout out to, I was trying to decide, because you haven't given me new copy yet, Ken.
Don't worry about it. You talk about Redpoint.
Okay. All right. So we're going to thank Redpoint for sponsoring today. Today's Redpoint specializes in code security by coders, which is bolstered by years of experience testing applications and conducting code reviews against all types of applications. Redpoint also offers secure code training to help ground your teams in better security practices across the development lifecycle. So check out redpointsecurity.com for more information and put your company on a path to better security. Thanks to Redpoint. Before we get into other things, I did want to call out training. We will be doing another Harnessing LLMs for Application Security training, online training, January 23rd and 24th. If you are interested, or if you have questions, jump into Slack. If you're interested, you can register at training.absoluteappsec.com. And we would love to have you along. We expect this one to be more crowded than the last one. There's quite a bit there to discuss and to talk about, especially as we integrate and Ken integrates more at Dry Run LLMs into the application security pipeline, where it fits, where it doesn't. We'll talk about good, bad. There's all sorts of things. The whole outline is there, and what we've actually implemented. Outside of that, I will be, and I think, Ken, you will be as well, at CactusCon in a few weeks, in February. That'll be the next of location. Yeah.
You say a few weeks. I'm like, oh, man. It is coming up that quick.
I guess it is about a month away. So I know we haven't talked, Ken and I haven't talked about it, but I'm sure we'll at least be doing a happy hour, or we'll be getting together. We'll do some event. We'll do something, right? I don't know if it'll be a full register for this event, or we'll just pick a location and say, hey, friends of the podcast, please come. This is what we're doing and where it will be. So keep an eye out for that. It's always a good time. And yeah, anything else that's on your calendar upcoming?
Nope. Just looking forward to that. Dry Run will be out at Code Mash, if anybody's at Code Mash. So, and one of the members of the Slack, Pete, will be there as well. Meaning he works for Dry Run, so he'll be at Dry Run at the booth at Code Mash in Sandusky, Ohio. I love Code. You've been to Code Mash, right?
Yes, I have. Yep.
Yeah.
I think
it's a great conference. Yeah.
It's one of those that I like it because it sneaks up right at the beginning of January. It's always kind of a difficult timing. From a timing perspective. I know the guys from Cloud Security Partners have been out there. I think they were there last year. Just a polyglot language conference, coding developer conference, not necessarily a security conference, but really interesting talks. I mean, I learned a lot when I was there, but it's like 4 days in the middle of nowhere, nothing else to do, right? At the Kalahari, I guess, besides jump into the water park.
Yeah, I remember when I went, there was just like snow outside everywhere, and you couldn't leave. Yeah, there's no point in actually leaving the facility, really, right? It's just it's all indoors and nice and whatnot. But yeah, I was actually gonna go this year, but man, just after spending, it was like half the year last year traveling, it felt like. I mean, it really was. It was like from spring to the end of the year, just nonstop travel. So I was like, well, I think I'm going to bow out on this one. I need a little bit more of a break before I get back to my traveling ways. So February kind of marks a little bit of the uptick in that travel. But yeah, as is the case every season, by April, at least March, April, it'll be getting back to full swing on the travel front, I'm sure, for everybody, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yeah. The first big one for me will be the first real travel will be Cactus Con. For me, that's pretty close though. That's not across the country, but there's a lot of other stuff that'll be upcoming. We'll be dropping a calendar onto appsec.com at some point this year. That's in the works, as well as more content, more, just maybe blog posts and a few other things. If you are interested, and I know we haven't necessarily put this call out before on the podcast, but if you are interested in being featured either on the blog, on the podcast, you're doing research, we would be more than happy to have you, present your research and do things. Reach out to Ken and I in Slack or on LinkedIn or social media, like choose your platform. But we're always looking for up and comers, like new research that's going on that we can highlight, and not necessarily, the players that have already been out there and have their name, right? Like, and are established. Yeah, we're just interested to see what's going on, basically. So,
yep.
Cool. All right. So the first thing that we wanted to get to today was a critical discussion of our predictions for 2024. Given that it's 2025, it's a new year. Episode 229 last year, Ken and I made our predictions, right? Like, we talked for an hour about what our predictions were for 2024. And so we wanted to review those. And I'm not sure how you want to do this. Should we just do one at a time, or should I just dump the full list here, Ken?
Yeah, let's just do it one at a time, if you're good with that.
Okay. Yep. The first prediction that we made last year, episode 229, for 2024, was that there would be an increase in both supply chain security and attacks. Okay, so from a critical perspective, do you feel like this is the case? Were we right?
An increase in, well, I don't know if it was an increase or like more notable events that occurred. I mean, it seemed like pretty much status quo. The only difference I'd say would be that we saw supply chain attacks against AI ecosystems. So I guess you could say there were more in that way, since it's expanded attack surface of what we consider to be supply chain attacks expanded. I think what most surprised me here was actually more of the focus this last year on reachability analysis and just to generally like techniques to give you. I guess it shouldn't be a surprise, right? I mean, how many people do you talk to when you're consulting? Say like, oh, hey, we handle Dependabot or we handle Sneak or whatever SCA findings in this way and this way usually. Well, in some organizations, they'll handle them right away. I mean, there are some that are just like that, right? More nimble companies, more security-minded companies, but I'm interested to hear, like, do you see the hey, I've opened a PR on your behalf to bump these dependencies? Is that working? Is it used?
I don't. No. I mean, I feel like we were right as far as so I just posted that ProNet article, right? Like, just one that I found, basically saying that supply chain attacks doubled last year, right? So, I mean, that's pretty much par for the course year over year. Watering hole attacks, those are more popular than ever. From a security perspective, the security itself built around supply chains has gotten better, but I don't necessarily see how should I say this? I don't necessarily see the results of those supply chain security tools being utilized as effectively as they could be. So what that means is the number of vulnerabilities that is coming out of there doesn't necessarily equate to I'm quashing all of these. That being said, this last year is probably the first year that we've stumbled into a few of these assessments that we've done year over year over year, where the number of vulnerabilities out of the supply chain have actually decreased. So if we're looking from a source code review perspective, something like the teams that we are working with are getting better at it. And so they've at least figured it out, right? But the new ones that I step into are pretty much par for the course. So, yeah. Anyway,
So
okay.
I think overall, if we were to summarize, like we mostly nailed that one.
We nailed it.
But
Yep.
didn't see maybe the solutions that people have come up with. Maybe didn't see those, at least on my end. I didn't see that the exact ways they were trying to get more accurate.
I mean, but we've had people on the podcast, like you talk about like traceability or reachability analysis, right? Like that has gotten better, which should lead to less false positives, at least in some of those tools. So, you know, I mean, it's a place where there's going to be ongoing research. There's going to be ongoing attacks, and it's, you know, it's just part of the ecosystem and part of security nowadays and part of AppSec. So expect it. Right. All right.
Cool.
Prediction 2, research and preventative measures from companies concerning prompt injection. I feel like prompt injection. So I'm going to dive into this one first. Had its moment,
please do. Yeah.
As we were like coming up with our list here, and while it's an issue, I feel like people moved on from it pretty quickly, right? It was oh yeah, we have to protect against this, and not much more went into it. I mean, there are the tools that are out there, the preventative measures, like, oh, we put this in front of an LLM to prevent prompt injection type stuff, like LM, you know, AI firewall type stuff that has popped up. So I'd partially say we were correct, but I don't feel like it was as big a research topic as I expected it to be. What's your take?
Yeah, I don't know if it was, I don't remember if I actually thought it was going to be like a huge thing, but I do remember thinking there's going to be tools developed for prompt injection. There's going to be research put out on how to prevent it, but also how to, you know, do further, or not further, do some more advanced sort of LLM firewall evasion techniques to get around the protections around prompt injection. So I don't know. I'd say like I definitely saw all those things come true. I don't know if it was, but if it's predicated on like it being a massive thing that like really swept the industry as a concern, then no, yeah, it's definitely not that.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
kind of.
Okay. Yep. All right. Prediction number 3. I feel like, yeah. Okay. After talking about Next.js as the preferred framework of 2023, right? Because we saw a lot of that, we predicted that the impact of not having strict separations within frameworks would lead to higher dependency of DevOps and DevSecOps. Yeah, I don't. Oh, this one, I feel like we overstated what would actually happen, what the impact would be, because it was just a natural progression, right? And you know, like as much as I saw Next.js in 2023, 2024, it's still there, but it definitely didn't get. I don't know. I like from an uptake perspective, the apps that I looked at, it wasn't as prevalent in 2024 as it was in 2023. Which means, hey, we might be doing a little bit better as far as separating out the client and server side code. But yeah, but on the flip side of that, like our reliance on DevSecOps for security tooling has just increased. So yeah, maybe like, what was your thoughts? What are your thoughts there?
this kind of reads to me in the way that it's stated, like, oh, if you don't use basically a super highly opinionated framework that separates things, like you're going to need more security stuff, people, tools, processes. I think that's always been true. I don't know that this prediction is something that I would call a massive success for the year 2024. So, uh, bust. I'd say a bust.
A bust. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah. I think I'm with you there. Just there wasn't a lot on that front. So okay, let's see. Next one. I know we got a lot, and then we'll dig into our 2025 predictions here shortly as well. Prediction 4: Copilot programs would be accurate and somewhat helpful, but ultimately interrupt workflow and struggle. Yeah, workflows and struggle to be widely introduced into the day to day. Yeah, go for it.
I have thoughts here. All right. So my initial comment on AI Copilot specifically is this seems somewhat accurate. It does interrupt the workflow. It does, I wouldn't say it struggles, but when I've talked to both my developer staff, as well as just to be looking around the internet, right, at what people are using, what I've noticed is that people get annoyed by the auto completion aspect. Sometimes it's not just that it recommends incorrect things sometimes, because most of the time it's pretty good. It's helpful for sure. And there's definitely boilerplate that gets placed in there that can be useful and all that. But it does like kind of shove in code that maybe the developer doesn't want. It can do that in a way that like really is interrupting you as you type. I've actually experienced this myself. But what I would say, so that's Copilot. I know Copilot's definitely done things to improve that experience. So this is not a specifically a knock against Copilot. What I would say is that I'm seeing it's actually more of a knock around, not even a knock. It's actually just that's the early approach. That was the early approach. Do like autocomplete, code snippets, whatever. That actually makes a lot of sense. But what I'm seeing now and what I think people are navigating to are things like windsurf and I always forget it. There's another one. There's another big one right now. Windsurf and something else. Cursor. Sorry.
Cursor.
So windsurf and Cursor. Yeah, where the IDE is pretty much out of the box AI native in a sense, right? So, and then you even see this with like we're having a discussion at the company right now about terminals, right? Like so, like Warp is a pretty interesting terminal where you can share workflows and save them and all that fun stuff, but also like you can actually get tips on how to better craft like your commands right inside the terminal, right? So like hey, I'm in the process of doing these like AWS CLI commands or whatever, and I like this is a real example that was shown, and yesterday actually we were having this conversation in the company, and it's like cool, like if you don't know what the next AWS CLI commands are, like it helps you figure that out. So why am I saying this? I'm saying that like both from like IDEs and terminals and pretty much everywhere else, you're starting to see native AI instead of bolting AI on top of with an extension. You're seeing natively built for this purpose IDEs and terminals. And the last thing I'll say there is that when I say what does that mean, when you say natively built into the IDE, well, as an example, we have these different we have different like analyzers, essentially we call them policies that run. So like we have like a SQL injection policy, mass assignment policy, et cetera, right? All these are our baseline policies before you start adding custom policies to like find your nuance specifics, whatever flaws, authorization, whatever. So the default policies have these different they've got things like few shot prompt examples. They've got context that we backfill to like explain what user input looks like or what a query should look like or whatever, right? So what was neat is when we were adding support for new like languages and frameworks, it automatically like it runs a set of executions. You actually see it like it's chain of thought. So it'll say like you can tell it like, hey, build me a payload set for this thing in this language, this framework, whatever, for this purpose. And boom, it goes through, it reviews all of the code, it figures out, and you see its execution steps. It does like compositional analysis, understands like your specific patterns, where things are defined, and you see it boom, 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 boom. It runs, and then blah, bam, you get this like code snippet that you can tweak if you need to, but you can copy and paste or like just say, yeah, I accept this, and it adds that. Basically, it does all this calculation on your entire source code, and then produces the code snippet that you want. And that's like different than saying, yeah, interrupt me as I'm typing and do some autocomplete jump. So the approach is improved quite a bit. Anyways, so I would say, sorry, to summarize my take before I ask you about yours, my take is you're right. I think the initial approach struggled, but I think overall the use of AI has actually skyrocketed and become more natively built into things. All right, you, Seth, sorry, your take on that. What do you think? Did we get it right?
I do, right. Like the tools that we're using are, have been more nuanced than what we saw initially, right? So any of the programs, they become more helpful, or they're somewhat helpful. But the second that they start to interrupt and and they stop, or they take you out of your flow, is where it's the problem. From a coding perspective, from a security perspective, if I have to struggle with the AI as opposed to actually digging in to look for vulnerabilities, that's where I like start to drop it out of my process, because it isn't well integrated in. And part of what you're talking about, like we teach that in the course as well, like not to, harp on it too much, but how to actually integrate those AI agents and your AI process and make it efficient for you to actually use, because that's part of the problem. And that's part of what we've struggled with at Redpoint as well, is how do we actually break this down? How do we utilize it on a day-to-day basis where it's internal to our workflow, as opposed to, oh, I'm going to ChatGPT, or I'm struggling with getting, AWS Bedrock or Claude to respond properly, or I'm playing with prompts rather than identifying vulnerabilities and doing what I should be doing. So I would say we're 50% on this one, right? Like there are the tools that are better about this, and it went further than what we expected, but I do feel like we've still struggled with it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. I think we still struggle a bit, but seeing some improvements.
Yep. Okay, 5. There's only 2 more that we've got. I've posted the full list into Slack as well. But prediction 5, splintering of LLMs due to complexities of weighing efficiency against privacy concerns. I don't know if this has happened.
No, I don't think it has at all. Like
At all.
So
yeah.
So like the idea being that there would be different LLM variations that would match your specific, I think anyways, match your specific use case, whether that's AppSec, whether that's scientific calculation, whatever it may be, whatever your thing is. The idea that you would need to, instead of interacting with an LLM that everybody else interacts with, you need your own, basically, for your own business purposes. And I think what we've seen is actually not that. I think what we've seen are people using RAG, using agentic AI, reflection, using these techniques to get what they, a few shot prompt example, all those fun things that we do to tune things. I think what you see is actually less. I think it's the opposite. I think what we've seen is more, because when I've said this story a bunch of times. When we first went down the LLM route, we built out this nice solution backed by OpenAI, and everyone's like, "This is pre. If you're an organization, we can like not train on the stuff the request you're sending to us or the interactions you're having." So everybody was really spooked out by that, and they were like, "No, you can't use OpenAI." So we went down many different routes. Still don't use OpenAI, but in any case, we don't use our own splintered, forked version of an LLM. I think most companies are using the big stuff, the big players. Anthropic, OpenAI, Azure OpenAI.
Well, and I think especially with
Amazon's offerings.
Yeah. Yeah, like the speed that the LLMs have progressed, even in the last year, right? Like how much better they have gotten. There hasn't been a need to do this. It's been more of, like you were saying, right? Like, hey, it's been more about prompt engineering. It's been more about few shot prompts, and actually building out, and doing RAG properly. It's learning that, as opposed to, oh, we're gonna like develop we're gonna train our own LLM to do that. I don't know if we ever get to this. So this prediction was off for sure. It happened in a different way than we expected. Um, and so I don't know, like we'll talk about it when we get to 2025, whether that will be something that will happen, but I think it's been pushed out further. Like I don't feel like it's necessarily a yeah, I don't think it's necessarily something that won't happen, because eventually companies will learn to train their own LLMs and will want to do it against their own data. But right now, it's such an expensive proposition to do that. It takes so much data processing, and like, yeah, like you look at the size of those the data centers where Meta and, yeah, Google and Claude, or on Anthropic and OpenAI are actually building those models, and it's going to take quite a while before that is democratized to the point that you know your insurance company can build their own LLM. But I still fear that day. I'm saying, right? Like it's going to happen, and it'll be interesting to see when it does.
Yeah, you'll probably see that used. So, because my thought pre agentic AI, right? Before I started really unlocking and then agentic AI was around way before O1. You mentioned O1 in the beginning, like
Yeah.
so for perspective, one of the reasons that ChatGPT's O1 model works so well is you'll see it actually go out and do a number of things. It looks like it does a combination of reflecting back on some of the going through like its internal sort of verbal loop, reinforcing the output that it's giving you. So like reflection, but also it's using agentic AI to go out and then browse the web, look through documentation, cite sources, whatever it might be. It'll go out and actually talk to other services as well to get answers that it needs, which is sort of a tenet of agentic AI. So I think, whereas originally it was like, oh, training is going to be the thing that gets you the accurate answers you want. It turns out, giving the LLM an execution plan, how it should think through its analysis when it talks to you, but also giving it access to more resources to get further follow up or further information it needs to answer questions. And then I think at the very end, after all of that's done, that's where you probably start as an organization. Once you've done all those things and you've gotten as close as you can to being as accurate as possible, that's probably the last moment at which you would go and then maybe start looking at, well, can some bits of this be done by our own tuned LLM that's specific for our needs. So I guess
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say is in a simpler way. Originally, I thought it was going to start with training of LLMs and then work their way up. And I think it's the opposite. I think we've gone through all of the stuff, like you said, basically, all the different methodologies. And at the end, then it's like, okay, well, this is our last step to really improve the results.
Yep. Yep. Cool. And I mean, this is also, like, this feeds into prediction 6 here. That's why I dropped it in there as well. That organizations are going to promote it or demote it based on how well they've been able to train their AI, and organizations that don't train, use generic models will suffer. I think the latter part of that was accurate, right? Like organizations that don't train generic models have suffered, right? And they will continue to do so. Like again, this is like the learning curve of, how do you use RAG? How do you engineer a prompt? How do you use agentic AI? Like if you're not doing those things, you need to come up to speed on them, right? But I don't necessarily think they've been promoted or demoted based upon this yet. And especially the AI training, like that's a miss. We're not doing that. You've got the big companies that are, training AIs, but it's not mom and pops, or it's not even like, Fortune 500 companies that are doing it now, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I feel like, yeah, I don't know. Like, any additional thoughts on that prediction, on that last prediction that we had?
Not really. No, and honestly, like it might even depends on the business, right? Like some businesses are just like Dryron. We're natively LLM backed. We started from the get go that way. We're not a product that did something else and then decided to add a feature of AI. I think for those companies, it's actually kind of hard because in some cases it's not. I mean, in some cases it'll be easy, right? Like it's pretty natural to go into Notion and have it say like, hey, I think I can help pre-fill out the boilerplate wording that you want to use for whatever article you're writing, for instance, right? But it's for other tools, it's like, no, why are you putting AI in there? And also, why are you making me explicitly read your 30-page terms of service to realize that I need to opt out of some feature that I've been opted into that is now, you know, my company hasn't even, I haven't thought about it, but let alone my company thought about the ramifications of introducing AI into this part of our tooling, right? I don't know. I think it might actually hurt some companies, and it might be the thing that's a bedrock of other organizations. So it really, like most things, comes down to there's shades of gray. It's a
Yeah,
spectrum. It's your business needs and context. Yeah,
yeah,
or purposes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, overall, then, predictions for last year, I feel like we were, yeah, 50% of them were spot on, and the rest were kind of gray.
Predicting the future is not like accurate science.
Jeez, like,
I've
imagine
been
that.
bamboozled by my fortune teller.
Dang it! Here,
Uh,
I'm gonna roll a d20 here to determine what's gonna happen next, right? All right.
Who knew a lady in
So
a trailer in Virginia didn't have the most accurate 2024 predictions? No, I'm kidding.
yeah. So you're saying
Cool.
you live in a trailer in Virginia? That's where we're going with this?
No, I'm going to my fortune teller who lives in a trailer in
Oh, yeah,
Virginia. I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Or
Sure.
works out of one. No, I'm making this, obviously. No, I don't know. Like, are we rolling into our 2025
Yeah, let's do
predictions?
that. Okay, so 2025 predictions. Yeah. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll go with an easy one, I think, which is billing models. I think like, I'm man, I'm dealing with this. Probably everybody's dealing with this. It's kind of weird, right? So like, especially, or actually, no, I should say this really just applies to anybody who's really heavily in the LLM space. So what I would say is that I think, but given that a lot of the tools that people are going to be using or are using moved that way or started that way, I think what you're going to see is a subscription model change a bit from like the way we've always done it is monthly, yearly, whatever, right? And I think the only thing that makes sense to me is to start to move towards a transactional model for billing. I mean, this isn't something novel that I thought of, right? This is actually when we did the Black Hat Startup Spotlight, the panel that did the judge, that judged the different startups for who got the number one spot. They were, or sorry, not. I think there were a couple panel members, but this was sort of like this conversation happened before the actual judging occurred, and they were talking about this on stage, and it made a lot of sense to me at the time. It makes even more sense now, which is like you know tokens cost money, right? And like you and I have experienced this where tokens cost money. The more that folks are using these LLMs, in theory, that should like drive the cost down. But actually, what we're seeing is that's not been quite the case. And also, you and I have experienced being throttled. Which so like for instance, AWS, they wanted everybody to use LLMs, right? And they've opened up their Bedrock service. They made it easy to get started, easy to get request access to these models and start using them. But as people start to use them, what I experienced as a company, as a dry run, what you've experienced with me when we did training, is that I don't know, 5-6 weeks ago, Amazon decided, oh, this usage is actually getting like hard for us to control now. A lot of people have latched on, mission accomplished,
Yeah.
but now we're having issues with available models. So they put overnight they like throttle people. They put these defaults into place on people's accounts that were even lower than what they said the default would be. And then you start getting like, requests that sort of time, or they say, hey, you're throttled. These requests can't go through. Retry again in X amount of time. So, anyways, my I guess just zooming out, my point is that you're seeing more usage. You're seeing companies have to react to that increased load. Obviously, data centers. Like I live in Northern Virginia. There's 32 data centers being built in the next like handful of years, and there's supposed to be another 30 after that, or 40 or something like that. And why is all this happening? We know why, right? So I don't know. My point is, I think billing will have to change because I think transactional, like token usage, right? Like that's going to be the thing that we have to bill people based off of, not like, how many users are using the system or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know if I made that very concise, but what are your thoughts there?
No, I tried to summarize it, right? Like I would agree, like there's a certain slice, or there's a certain customer that's what they're going to be looking for, right? And especially from the on-demand like use of AI and LLMs in general. Larry in Slack, he said that subscription model changes make sense to deal with usage volume, but some people will want a predictable spend and will be okay with a cap on usage, right? Like, so I'm with you. It's going to end up being more like, cell phone plans, right? Like back in the old days where it was like, hey, if you have so much data, you have so many tokens that you can use for a certain subscription. And then once you exhaust that, we're gonna limit you, basically.
Yeah.
You've used too much for this month or whatever it is. Like, as much as I hate that model, like I much prefer the transactional model where it's just like, hey, I pay, and if I need to use more, I'm going to use more, and just bill me for it, right?
That's why I was so infuriated when I came back to the States after being overseas for 6 years. And I'm like, what do you mean I gotta get a cell phone monthly plan? I can't just buy some minutes on my SIM card. What are you talking about, you nutcases? I don't want to subscribe to your $100 and something dollar. I don't need to spend $100 and something. You know what I mean? Like, I think indirectly, I don't know if it'll even be directly, right? Like, I think it might be indirectly. Like to the point here of what Larry was saying, and what you're saying, which is like take my company for instance, right? Some pull requests are larger than others. They eat up more tokens than others to perform analysis on, right? And the conversations that happen and all that fun stuff that goes on. Well, maybe I'm not saying this is something we're doing. I'm just saying, just hypothetically, you could say, well, here's the amount of pull requests, for instance, that we're going to cap for the time period, or here's the amount of repositories that we're going to allow you to run these. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like indirectly putting something, it may not be very clear that that's what's going on, but I could see that it indirectly impacting the schema or structure for how people build depending on what their product does.
Yep. Mark did say, yeah, like some companies like subscription models because more people underutilize than overutilize, right? Base subscription for plus overage charges. Yeah, that's definitely, like, again, it goes back to the mobile device, the cell phone usage patterns, right? That feels like a natural progression here, given the limited availability of those resources, or the capped availability of those resources, right?
I've seen that already, like like Langsmith, for instance, and OpenAI, right? These are two good examples where you put in your base spend amount, and then you put in an overage cap after that. So it's actually exactly what Mark is saying. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just like excited because, like, yes, I've actually seen this in action.
Yeah, it's going to be way more expensive. I don't know if it's necessarily going to feed to being more expensive, like maybe the overage charges if you are on those subscriptions, because you've actually seen a decrease in how much things cost. If you compare the cost of the original, like Chat GPT, or whatever 3.5 versus 4 versus 4.0 versus like some of those have decreased, and even like comparing that to what Anthropic is doing from a transactional perspective, It could be. Like who knows from a pricing perspective, right? Like I have a hard time like predicting what that's going to look like, right? I'm going to look at that link though. That
I know I'm like reading the article. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't read this article while I'm, but it's thank you for the share because I definitely will be reading this. That's awesome.
Outcome based, right? Yeah, that could be interesting.
By the way, that Pete is the Pete that will be at Code Mash for those who are also in Slack and watching.
Cool. All right. Dang it, I had something else copied, but then I forgot to drop it here. So my next, let's move on to another prediction, right? Sure. Prediction 2025-2 OWASP. OWASP Top 10 2025 will be released and will include, this one's an easy one. Well, and someone will be upset, right? As much as Brian and the team, right, like are trying to make it data based and base the top 10 on actual, like using data analytics. They've got the process all laid out. Someone is always up in arms, and it's usually about that last one or two, like the community vulnerabilities or the community exploits that they drop into that. So it is coming. It's going to be fun to watch, as it always is, because people get up in arms and everybody's got their favorite. But then on the flip side of that, I did want to do 2B, right? Like I guess that was 2A. 2B is that the top 10 will continue to get more generic focused as it has in the last couple of years, as opposed to specific vulnerabilities. Like there's not going to be a huge shift in what the top 10 looks like from the 2021 list to the 2025 list. I would be surprised if there's much more than a little bit of movement between things like broken authentication and authorization, and then the monitoring. Like those vulnerabilities will move around a little bit, but most of it's going to stay pretty much the same.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, that does make sense. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. All right. So we've talked about model billing for AIs. We've talked about the OWASP top 10. Other predictions, right? Do you have anything, like what do you predict is going to happen in other places in AppSec, right? So if we talk supply chain, right? The software supply chain, what do you think is going to happen in 2025 with the software supply chain?
I know what hope would happen, but I don't think that's going to, I'd love to see these big companies put more money into the package management ecosystems and protecting and I think in some cases that's happened, but not maybe as well as we'd want. I don't know. The answer is I really don't know. This is a blind spot for me, just in the sense that because like reachability analysis is totally possible, right? Like that's actually something that I think. So I don't know how, like, yeah, obviously I don't know what's gonna happen in this space, but I imagine there should be more focus on those details that you can fill out. And like I forget which guest we had that we were talking about, like the OSV, where you can actually put in like here's the function name and is that me or you? Are you hearing an iPhone thing? It's not me actually.
I think it was me somewhere. It's fine.
Oh, okay. It's like, what is that? Yeah, I was like, dude, I heard it. I was like, what? Like, is this me? Is this because the soundproof headphones or something, whatever? Any noise canceling. Anyway, so I forget what I was even saying.
Supply chain.
Supply chain. Yeah. So basically, like, I think that there needs to be more emphasis on, and hopefully there is more emphasis on the details of what tools that will need to have some context, as we always say, or background information. Those tools will need to have a place that they can look through in the source or a thing that they can look through source code for to see if it's actually vulnerable. And I don't think it's that hard. I think as long as the documentation improves, that's always, it's not super simple, right? But if the documentation's improved, then I think that it'll be easier for folks to build tooling that does reachability analysis. I hope that's the case. I don't know. I would really like to see package managers also have like a, a boost in their security practices as well. And I'll say the last thing I'll say here, which carries forward from 2024. Yeah, I definitely think we're going to see an increase in attacks on sophisticated attacks on the ecosystems that live around LLMs and AI, because that is the hotness. It is here to stay. There are many tools in this ecosystem. There are many places to do nefarious things. Why wouldn't you if you're an attacker? So what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think supply chain attacks are going to get more refined up to this point, and we see this from the analysis that 6 Mile or that Paul and Slack has been doing as well, like with his company and things, right? Like the amount of malware or like malicious packages that get pushed into NPM specifically, right? Like it's a difficult problem. And so I'm with you that it's going to increase, like it's going to get more sophisticated. I feel like uh, companies that do reachability analysis will have less issues and less things to patch, but it doesn't mean that's going to decrease. Um, the nature of package managers and the software supply chain is that we accept open source packages into those repositories. And so malicious actors will be able to continue to be malicious actors. And no matter the amount of analysis that we do on JavaScript packages or the pre and post scripts that are included in there, it's very much like like Apple, right? Or Google and their Play Store and the app stores that they have. Um, that's all that this is. It's a library store, and unless you want to lock it down like Apple does and require payment, require signing of everything, have certification process, and have an army of developers that are reviewing those packages before they're released, you're never going to get the same security that Google and Apple have in their app stores. So it's going to get worse. I don't see it as getting better before we put the money into it.
Very true.
Yeah.
I guess one area that did surprise me in 2024 was like, SBOMs were going to be like such a big deal, and sort of like, yeah, it's just one more thing that we do, and
Yeah,
we saw that interesting talk a year ago at CactusCon about SBOM attacks, and
yeah,
I don't know, I feel like that's kind of it. I fizzled.
Yeah, I mean, SBOMs are just a part of the supply chain, right? Like when it comes down to it. And yeah, it helps do more analysis, but you're still including libraries in there. I don't know, right? Like the more knowledge that we have, the better off we're going to be on how to protect our applications. So SBOMs are important that way. So you want to know what's going into things, but I don't see that as a silver bullet for solving anything. I mean, that's me personally, and especially walking in and doing code reviews and assessments on applications. SBOMs didn't change my life at all. I mean, did it change yours? Right? Like, are you doing SBOM analysis? I don't know if I'm like asking too much about what dry run's doing underneath the hood.
No one's I think like maybe one person's even mentioned, hey, could you generate SBOMs or something like that, and they're like, yeah, we don't do that. But that's about it. I really haven't had a lot involved or like any conversations really that even that's why I'm saying like it was surprising. I thought that was gonna be more of a thing, and no, not really. Just no, not asking to analyze them, not asking to generate them. Okay, cool. Yeah. But again, yeah, it's more of just a thing that is done. It's not, you know, it's not like a big security thing. Are you frozen? Is that what's going on? You look frozen. Or is my internet having issues? Let me go to chat. All right. If people can hear me. Oh, I think it was Seth. I think Seth dropped. Maybe. All right. Well, I'm gonna say that it was Seth that dropped. I'm just gonna keep this going and talking. If there are any questions anyone has while we wait on Seth, I'm happy to answer them.
Whoops.
There we go. There's Seth. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, you're back too quick for me to get asked any question. I said, you know what? While we wait, yeah, okay. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer them.
It's me. I don't know what happened there. I never do, right?
It's you.
All right.
You're the problem. It's you.
Yep, I'm the problem. It's me for sure. Software supply chains. Okay, so we probably want one or two more predictions. Jeez, and I spelled prediction wrong. Man, welcome to my life. That's yeah.
Wizard never misspells words.
I know. Okay, so any other predictions then? So we talked software supply chain. We've got OWASP. We've got AI. Anything on the LLM or AI front that you feel like is going to happen, or you're foreseeing? Because you're using them on a daily basis, right? Like I know we went through a bunch of those for last year, but anything that you think should happen or may happen, I guess.
Well, I think so. This is interesting because if you look back a year ago in the early conversations I had with folks on like AI and application security, I mean, I felt like every time I even had it was kind of laughable almost, how dismissive and cynical some folks were about AI's use in AppSec. And what I would say is now I feel like that's gone away. Those conversations are easy. Folks have latched onto, they see it, right? So why am I saying that? I'm saying I definitely first see the community embrace, or I'm seeing it. I'm seeing them embrace LLMs for AppSec. Now, what does that mean? I've seen everybody's trying to figure out a good way to use these machines and to use these systems to bolster software security. I think what you might see is a change, and hopefully you see this, a change in the way that we protect our applications. And this could be in the form of, there's many forms this could take, right? There's like, I'm getting a little distracted, by the way, because there's the snow. So by the way, just as an aside, it snowed heavily here, like heavily, right? And so we're all snowed in. The kids are out of school today as well. And so as I'm looking out the window, I'm seeing like a Christmas Story scene where there's these kids and they're in these fat jackets, and one of them was literally mounted on the other, playfully, like it was play fighting, messing with them. So I'm like looking out here because I'm getting distracted because I'm looking out here and seeing this funny. It literally looked like a Christmas Story set in today's. Anyways, all right. So back to it. I think you'll see the AppSec community embrace AI. Now I've seen it in a number of ways to date. I've seen automated threat models being produced. We've seen remediation advice given through companies like Pixie and Corgia and Mob. Those companies that do like they try to give you little patches you can accept and put into your code base to fix things. As you know, if a developer writes something insecurely, you can pull in a patch or something like that. You're seeing companies like us who are trying to have more of a conversational, assistant by your side, protecting the organization, giving you overwatch as to what's changing, giving you the ability to do more nuanced analysis. And I think that's like, so two thoughts here. One, I think LLMs allow us to do more nuanced analysis. The argument before was the context window lengths were just too small to be able to get some full analysis going. Not an issue anymore. Obviously, agentic AI completely changes the game there. So it's not a problem. That's not a real issue. In fact, if anything, what you're saying, like seriously, go use Windsurf and you'll see exactly what I mean. Like it's pretty incredible what's possible. The other thing though I see in talking about agentic AIs, I could see a world in which, like, like take Tines, for example. I don't know if you're familiar with Tines at all, but and for the listeners, Tines is a cool company. They do integrations specifically for like security people. So you can drag and drop. It's really cool, actually. You should check it out. So if you're using tooling and you need to notify things and do things, basically like it's a drag and drop, low code, no code solution. I can say like, here, set up this webhook here. And then once this webhook gets hit, then, maybe send an HTTP request off, maybe use one of these, like maybe pull in a Jira image and then pull which kind of like issue creation maybe. And then it's all very easy, right? You just parse out, you literally like point and click down JSON, take what you want out of that, parse it. They have like these data transformers, super easy, right? So it almost looks like Lucidchart, and you can integrate things very easily by dropping and choosing fields and all that fun stuff. Well, I see that same kind of thing being like a product area for agentic AI. So I could see a world in which a company builds themselves. It's like, hey, we've got, I don't know, an agent that does that pulls in from your Notion docs or your whatever secure code docs and pulls in some information, or maybe an agent that goes and looks at the latest we're talking about supply chain, right? Looks at the latest things for today that have been put out there as like, these are vulnerable dependencies for X reasons, or maybe some nefarious actors have put out some malicious libraries. So that's one agent. And then, so I guess what I'm trying to say is I could see a company like a Tines, but for like agentic AI emerging as well, or a whole set of companies. So I don't know, man, like there's a lot of different ways this could all go, just because it really is just a limitation of our own creativity on how to use these systems.
Yeah.
It's a long-winded answer. What's yours? I'm sorry.
No, I'm with you, because the analysis is going to get better. The use is going to get better. That's what we saw in 2024. We'll see a continuation of that. Ways to use it, because I saw somebody, like one of the conferences I went to, they came up with basically they were doing, they were using LLMs to run threat models, right? Via Slack or via chat. So you would step into it, and it was almost like it would start by asking questions, right? Like, oh, here is the initial prompt, right? Like, we have this system. What is it that, we want to actually analyze? What do we want to do? They gamed out threat modeling using LLMs, right? And I was like, that's ingenious, right? Because at that point, you have developers engaging in a chat channel when they have time to actually do the threat model, as opposed to, I have to get everybody in a room, I have to sit everything down, I have to form everything up, and all the steps that we've taken in the past. And that's what I'm saying is we'll have a continuation of the use and novel uses of these LLMs to solve the problems that we have, and it's all going to be based on that creativity, all those factors, right? Like we see that over time with developers, with application security in general. So I don't feel like this is outside of that realm of possibility. Yeah.
Dude, I'm with you. I did an interview for a book, and it was they shared a prompt, and it was literally a conversation. It was like follow-up questions based off of how I answered. It was all the LLM doing all of this, right? It was prompted on how to conduct the interview, but the rest was the LLM kind of dancing and improvising is what I'm trying to say. And so, like, yeah, from a threat model perspective, for instance, like that's a hell of a way that's a very compelling use case to create an interview prompt, essentially. Then at the end of that, have the data that you need to produce initial threat model. Very easy, gamified, fun, quick, stays in this like shift left sort of approach that everybody's talked about. So that's really, really cool. I like that. It seems like an awesome use case.
Well, and there's a lot of places where we haven't seen LLMs being used yet, right? Like, there's a lot of place for creativity. You look at look at AppSec in general, like where we fit into the SDLC, And there's still portions of that from a training perspective. Like there's, things that we do from a CTF, we're training developers. There's probably places that we could start to inject LLMs to help increase the efficiency of that and make it more gamified and make it more interesting, or, help that out, right? Like all of these different places, like the building of requirements, the asking of requirements, like the stuff that you were doing with RAG is already there. But we haven't quite got to the point that it's fully integrated. So it's going to be interesting to watch this next year or in the next couple of years. But, I think that's a pretty easy one for anybody in the industry, right? Like everybody's kind of seeing that writing on the wall now. Whereas last year it felt more like we were fighting against that. Like, oh, you can't use LLMs, right? Like it was either all in or nothing, right?
Yeah, it was the landscape in a year has changed so freaking dramatically. Like I can very much remember August or September of 2023 being like, guys, latch on. Like, this is going to be a ride. Like, you got it. Here's what it can do. Here's some of the stuff that we've even talked about today. I was saying this is going to be on the roadmap. It's going to be possible. You can use, and then like, it was just like, there were definitely folks who were receptive to that idea, bunch of skeptics, and we're seeing like now, fast forward a year and 3 months, and it's like, totally different world. Everybody's sort of embraced it and acknowledged it. So now the question becomes, what are the best ways to do it? And I think it's I just want to say this, I think it's a real opportunity right now to think differently about the way that we've solved problems in the past, right? Like literally rethink our programs and and the processes we put into place. Everything from like our initial sort of, like a releases process, how to revamp that to be a very streamlined, like, process, how to watch the security health of a service, for instance, over time, move up or down, whether it's giving feedback so that maybe you're not doing formal training in the sense where you're sitting down for 8 hours, but instead you're using tooling to give iterative feedback and then use that as a training mechanism for your developers. I mean, instead of just bolting on AI to our existing processes, I think the idea should be, okay, we have a fundamentally different way that we can solve problems now, and start from that first, and then tackle software security problems, instead of saying, well, here's how we've been doing it for these XY reasons, and then that's just bolt on some AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you there, because that's been the discussion point that we've been having, is especially with agentic AI and like what we're trying to do. I'm starting to look at like the secure code review process and the pen testing process from the lens of, okay, can we rewrite how this is happening so it's more efficient using agentic AI rather than trying to replace certain aspects of what I'm doing on a day-to-day with that, right? And there's been some successes that we've had internally, like nothing that I really want to codify yet. There's been failures as well, right? Trying to, ragify, I should say, a whole code base and then ask questions of it. Yeah, that's a fool's errand, right? Like there's certain things that we can talk about on, hey, this is not a use case for AI, right? This is not a use case for LLMs. We've got to approach it in a different manner. Cool. Well, we've been going for over an hour. I did like last prediction. The question I have to you is, like, where do you think we'll see the next big breach? I'm going to hold you to this one too.
Where is in what industry, what product line?
Industry. We'll go industry.
Gosh, man, that's a hard one. I'm sure somebody right now is like, this is easy. I don't know. Yeah, come back to me. Do you have any thoughts? I really don't know. I don't know who's going to be breached next.
I mean, our data's all out there,
Yeah.
right? Like,
If a breach falls in the woods, does it make a
does it
noise, or
matter, right? Like,
does it
yeah.
really matter? Let's ask a different question. Does it matter these days? It just seems like, well, kind of. I don't know. I
Okay,
would
so
imagine that
the
at some
breaches
point, training
don't
data from
matter.
I don't know.
That's going to be
Next
prediction
breach.
number 5, right? Yeah.
Breaches don't matter. That's the 20. I love that. That's a better one.
I was expecting to respond with yes, right? Like, yeah, I mean, like from an industry perspective, it happens everywhere, and so it's yeah. I honestly, like, breaches don't really matter. We've had this discussion for years. I think it was Jerry Gamblin that first said that, right? Like when he came on the podcast, is it's just like it doesn't affect a company's bottom line anymore. It barely registers in the news. Seems like Troy Hunt is the only one that really pays attention, right? Like, because he's gathering all the password hashes from the deep web as they get exported, right? Like, yeah, do they matter?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
that one's more
actually,
fun. Yeah,
I'm with you. Yeah. I'm trying to remember that Charlie Miller, I think, was the first person that I believe who like actually did the math, or that I remember anyways, that did like the math, and not just the math, but the research to show like, no, actually you make money in the long run after breach. So
yeah.
it's like, I was like, there's that AppSec Cali I'll never forget, because it was just like, wow, this is the most beautiful place to get depressed over the state of my chosen field. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyways,
Sweet. Okay, well, good ones. We will summarize. Like, we'll come back to these, I'm sure, throughout the year. Or if not, then 2026, we'll go through the list, see how we did. But jump into Slack. Let us know what your predictions for 2025 are. Happy to hear those. Right, like Peter was saying something similar with agentic. The computer use, like or Claude computer
right.
use, or similar AIs locally are going to disrupt agentic pen tester tools. That's going to be the case. The fact that we have things like Apple Intelligence, where we have Olama, we've got the ability to do this locally, is going to help things along and speed up some of the things that we do.
Yeah, having an LLM that can like plug into your system and like interact with your computing environment, that's gonna be
yeah, exactly. That's where we're both at. Yeah. Anything else? Any final thoughts for today, Ken, before we close it out?
No, I am excited for the training. I just want to reiterate, we are giving our up. We gave this course before, but we've tweaked it even further for more stuff. The harnessing LLM course that we're giving for software security purposes at the end of the month. That's January 23rd and 24th. Even if you don't want to go, if you could spread the word as our viewers, I would really appreciate. I know Seth and I would really appreciate that. You can sign up, or people can find out more information at training.appsec.com. But would really I'm excited for it. Share it. Let's get folks registered. There's a lot of use cases here. And I think what's really neat about it is we're giving you the baseline concepts, we're giving you use cases, we're giving you real ways to apply this, but back to sort of tying this into all of our predictions and talking about creativity, this is the fundamental underlying, these are the fundamental underlying concepts you need. But from there, you'll have the ability to go and get creative. And that's exciting to me, to basically have a bunch of AppSec practitioners who know how to use AI for software security purposes, and then allow them to come up with novel solutions that hopefully maybe even influence the direction of the industry. So it's an exciting time. I think 2025 is actually going to be pretty awesome. That's my main prediction.
Yep. Sweet. Well, good. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. Thanks for the interaction. As always, if you want to support the podcast, merch, there is podcast merch that's available. We'll be doing some updates there. We do have sponsorship available for each episode, or, if your organization is looking to, sponsor or, advertise via, application security practitioners, let us know, and we can provide you with a prospectus there. Otherwise, yeah, we will see everybody online, or we'll see you all next week. Thanks all.
Thank you.